The relentless urban murmur of the city often felt like a dull, perpetual ache in Ethan's bones. At 16, Ethan was a quiet, solitary teenager, finding solace in the worn pages of books and the intricate world of technology. A subtle melancholy clung to him, a shadow cast by the sudden, heartbreaking loss of his beloved father, a firefighter, just a year prior. School was a gauntlet of whispered taunts and casual shoves, his shyness and nerdy appearance making him an easy target for bullies. His refuge was Willow Creek Park, a sprawling green expanse where he could escape the harsh realities of his life and lose himself in stories, or simply watch the clouds drift by. In the forgotten corners of that very park, a grizzled, silver-muzzled German shepherd named Max carved out a meager existence. His once sleek coat was now matted and stained, his intelligent eyes clouded with the film of age, yet still sharp with an underlying wariness. Max was abandoned, left to fend for himself, a shadow of his former self. What few knew, what even Max himself couldn't fully recall, was that he was once Jasper, a legendary K-9 officer, a master of search and rescue. His nose was a marvel, his loyalty unwavering. But a tragic, botched mission, a betrayal he dimly remembered, had left him severely injured, his memories fractured, his identity stripped away. The police force, believing him dead, had moved on. Now, he lived a nameless, forgotten life, haunted by fleeting, disjointed echoes of sirens, the acrid scent of gunpowder, and desperate cries in the dark. He remained hidden beneath the overgrown bushes, his body trembling from hunger and the biting cold of dawn. He learned to become invisible, emerging only under the shroud of night to scavenge for scraps from overflowing trash cans, his instincts dulled by exhaustion and fear. He avoided human eyes, their gaze too often filled with indifference or pity, which he, in his forgotten pride, could not bear. Ethan's life was similarly muted. He'd sit alone in the bustling school cafeteria, his gaze empty, fixed on the rain-streaked window pane, his backpack bearing the faint scuffs of countless shoves and kicks. His world was small, contained within the pages of a book, a shield against the noise and cruelty of others. One particularly chilly evening, as Max, driven by gnawing hunger, cautiously ventured near the park's desolate playground, a faint, muffled cry pierced the silence. It was the weak whimper of a child, lost and disoriented, hidden deep within a thicket of thorny bushes. Max paused, his ears twitching. The scent of fear, mingled with the faint, sweet smell of a child, stirred something deep within him, a primal echo of a forgotten purpose. Despite his aching body and the instinctive fear of human interaction, the powerful, ingrained drive of a search and rescue dog flared to life. He let out a series of sharp, insistent barks, a sound that, despite his old age, carried surprising authority. The barks caught the attention of a lone jogger passing by, who, startled, ventured closer. Max, ignoring his own vulnerability, limped purposefully towards the bushes, nudging the jogger forward until they discovered a small, frightened child, tangled in the undergrowth, her bicycle overturned beside her. This single act of selfless heroism, performed despite his personal hardship, was Max's "save the cat" moment, showcasing his inherent goodness and reawakened instinct, cementing him as an underdog hero in the reader's mind. A few days later, Ethan, seeking his usual solitary retreat, stumbled upon Max. The old dog lay curled up, a pathetic heap of matted fur and bones, shivering uncontrollably. Ethan felt an immediate, inexplicable tug in his chest. It wasn't pity, but a strange sense of recognition, a kinship with another solitary soul. Without a second thought, he reached into his pocket, pulling out the few crumpled dollars he had for lunch. He walked to a small corner store, using his meager funds to buy a small bag of cheap dog food. He returned and spent the entire afternoon sitting silently beside Max, gently offering him the food. And then, in a quiet, comforting gesture, he began to read aloud from his worn paperback, his voice a soft, soothing balm against the park's ambient noise. This simple, empathetic act, an act of unexpected kindness from a boy who had every reason to retreat into himself, was Ethan's "save the cat" moment, instantly garnering reader sympathy and solidifying his role as a compassionate, unlikely hero. As Ethan continued to visit Max daily, sharing his quiet presence and meager offerings, he noticed something peculiar. Around Max's neck, half buried beneath matted fur, was a collar. It was old, grimy, almost illegible, but he could make out the faint glint of tarnished metal. He made a silent promise to himself. He would clean it, perhaps find a name, a clue to Max's forgotten past. This small detail, the obscured collar, served as the seed of mystery, hinting at Max's hidden identity and purpose, intertwining his past with Ethan's present and setting the stage for future revelations. Max himself was plagued by fragmented dreams, vivid but disjointed flashes of a man in a crisp blue uniform, the shrill wail of sirens, and the glint of a badge bearing the emblem of an eagle. Sometimes, a sudden loud noise or a peculiar scent would jolt him awake, his body tensing, his instincts screaming as if he were on an urgent, dangerous mission. Then, just as quickly, the memories would recede, leaving him disoriented and fearful, the sharp edges of the past blurring back into a confusing haze. Willow Creek, the city itself, was a place steeped in history, its charming tree-lined streets speaking of a bygone era. But beneath its tranquil facade, a new unsettling current was brewing. A disturbing rise in missing persons cases, particularly among the city's more vulnerable population, cast a growing shadow. Whispers of a shadowy criminal organization, operating unseen in the city's underbelly, began to circulate, stirring a quiet unease among its citizens. Ethan and Max, two solitary figures adrift in their own quiet struggles, were about to be pulled into the heart of this brewing storm, their fates intertwined with the city's escalating crisis. The bond between Ethan and Max, forged in shared silence and simple acts of kindness, deepened with each passing day. Ethan, with a meticulous care that belied his age, coaxed the old German shepherd back to a semblance of health. He'd spend hours gently brushing the matted fur, his fingers probing the thin frame beneath, coaxing out the tangles and grime that had accumulated during Max's time on the streets. He'd carefully clean the old collar he'd found, revealing faint, almost ghostly engravings. Jasper, K9, Unit, and a series of identification numbers. The discovery sent a quiet ripple of intrigue through Ethan. Jasper, K9 Unit. The words whispered of a past far grander, more purposeful than he could have ever imagined for the timid, abandoned stray. This quiet uncovering of Max's hidden identity stirred something in Ethan, a nascent sense of purpose that had been dormant, buried beneath the grief of his father's death. It was the first time in a long while that he felt a glimmer of genuine excitement, a subtle curiosity that transcended his usual solitary world of books. He often found himself staring at the cleaned collar, trying to picture Jasper, the K9 officer, imagining the adventures he must have had, the lives he might have saved. Ethan's adoption of Max, however, was not without its immediate, very real challenges. His mother, already struggling under the oppressive weight of mounting bills and her own raw grief, had initially been hesitant. "Ethan, darling, we barely have enough for ourselves," she'd said, her voice thin with exhaustion, tracing circles on the worn kitchen table. "A large dog. It's a huge responsibility. The food, the vet bills. It's just not practical." But Ethan's quiet, persistent plea, his solemn promise to take full responsibility, coupled with Max's remarkably gentle demeanor and the undeniable, almost palpable connection between boy and dog, eventually wore down her resistance. She watched, a silent observer, as Max, once a cowering shadow, slowly began to unfurl under Ethan's tender care, his eyes gaining a new spark, his tail a tentative wag. Max officially became a part of their small, fragile family, a silent, furry testament to an unexpected fragile hope. Their apartment, once echoing with the quiet ache of two grieving souls, now held the soft thud of a tale, the gentle rustle of a dog settling into slumber, a new comforting presence. Ethan would often whisper secrets to Max in the dead of night, sharing his fears about school, his loneliness, and his longing for his father. Max, in turn, would listen, a comforting weight curled at the foot of his bed, his steady rhythmic breathing a quiet reassurance. The fragile peace of their new routine, however, was shattered with brutal suddenness, a sharp, dissonant chord striking through their quiet lives. The very next morning, a frantic, desperate call pierced the quiet of their apartment. echoing the primal fear that every parent harbors. Lily, the bright-eyed 7-year-old sister of Jessica, Ethan's former best friend and now, ironically, one of his main tormentors at school, had vanished from Willow Creek Park. The news hit Ethan like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. He remembered Lily's infectious giggle, her small, eager face peeking from behind Jessica's skirt years ago, before everything changed. He saw Jessica later that day, a ghost of her former self, her face swollen and red-rimmed from endless tears, her voice hoarse from frantically calling out Lily's name as she distributed missing flyers. The sight of Jessica's raw, open wound of grief mirrored his own unspoken pain, the familiar ache of loss, magnified by the terrifying uncertainty of Lily's fate. The local police, though well-intentioned and working tirelessly, seemed utterly overwhelmed. Their search efforts, meticulously concentrated on the park's main trails and picnic areas, yielded nothing. The hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, each passing minute a heavy weight, slowly but inexorably dimming the hope of finding Lily safe. The media, initially cautious, began to descend, their flashing cameras and intrusive questions adding another layer of chaos to the already frantic scene. The city, usually so placid, now buzzed with an unsettling hum of fear and whispered rumors of sinister forces at play. Ethan, who had already known the chilling finality of loss, felt a cold dread clawing at his throat, a sickening sense of déjà vu. He desperately wanted to help, to somehow avert this tragedy, to bring Lily home. But he was just a quiet, unassuming teenager, easily dismissed by his peers, often overlooked by adults. Who would listen to him? Who would believe him? Then, a flicker of memory, sharp and vivid, pierced through the fog of his despair. Max. He remembered the old dog's unexpected heroism in the park, leading the jogger to the lost child. He remembered the intensity in Max's eyes, the purposeful set of his aging body. Max had an uncanny instinct, a nose for things hidden, for lives in peril. Could he help now? The thought, fleeting at first, quickly solidified into a desperate, unshakable conviction. Ethan looked at Max, who, sensing the pervasive anxiety and the rising tide of frantic energy in the house, had begun to pace restlessly, a low, worried whine rumbling in his chest. The dog's ears twitched, his head held high, sniffing the air with an intensity that suggested a heightened, almost preternatural awareness of the crisis unfolding around them. He seemed agitated by the pervasive scent of human panic, and the faint, specific scent of Lily, carried on the breeze from the park. He would stop occasionally, his gaze fixed on Ethan, as if silently pleading for direction, for release, for a chance to fulfill his deepest purpose. Max, internally, was a maelstrom of conflicting instincts and reawakened trauma. The raw despair emanating from the humans around him, particularly Ethan, stirred a profound, almost painful longing within him, a desperate need to do something. Fragmented memories, like shards of broken glass, flashed through his mind. The echo of frantic shouts, the metallic tang of blood, the acrid smoke of a devastating fire, the crushing weight of fallen rubble, the chilling sound of a gunshot. He remembered the intense focus, the exhilarating rush of a successful find, a life pulled from the brink, followed by the crippling terror of a mission gone horribly wrong, a moment of profound betrayal. His instincts, sharpened by years of elite K-9 training, screamed at him to act, to find, to save. But the deep-seated fear of his past failure, of that one tragic day that had cost him his identity and nearly his life, still clung to him, a cold, suffocating shroud suppressing his innate drive. He was Jasper, the hero, but he was also Max, the discarded, broken creature. The confusion was agonizing, his powerful, ingrained drive clashing violently with his deep-seated fear and the fragmented whispers of a past he couldn't fully reclaim. He would pace, whine, then suddenly drop to the floor, panting, as if wrestling with an invisible demon. Ethan watched Max, his heart aching with a mixture of hope and frustration. He believed in Max, despite the skepticism that would surely follow. He tried to approach a patrol officer near the park's entrance, stammering his idea, his voice barely audible above the rising clamor. "My dog. He's special. He can find her. He's a K-9. He was a K-9 unit." But his words were met with a dismissive wave, a weary, almost pitying glance. He was just a child, trying to cope with tragedy, inventing fanciful solutions. "Son, we appreciate your concern, but we have trained professionals on this," the officer said kindly, but firmly, turning away. Ethan's face burned with humiliation. This was the point of no return. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous hues of orange and purple, the lead officer announced that the immediate park search was being scaled back. They would shift to door-to-door inquiries, a wider perimeter search, and a more intensive investigation of Lily's home. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. The chances of finding Lily alive would diminish significantly with every passing moment, with every hour that slipped away into the encroaching night. Ethan knew this was their last real chance, their only chance, before Lily became just another statistic, another cold case. He looked into Max's cloudy yet oddly piercing eyes, and saw not just an old dog, but a flicker of the courageous Jasper, the K9 legend, waiting for a command, waiting to be unleashed. A quiet, fierce resolve hardened in Ethan's heart, melting away the last vestiges of his shyness and despair. He had lost his father. He wouldn't stand by and watch another family lose their child, not if there was even the slightest glimmer of hope. He wouldn't abandon Max, who had found him, just as he wouldn't abandon Lily, who was now utterly, terrifyingly lost. He made his decision, a silent, ironclad vow. Without a word to his exhausted mother or to anyone else, Ethan took Max's newly cleaned collar in hand, his fingers tracing the faint engraved letters. He walked purposefully out of the apartment, a silent defiance in his youthful stride. He knew he would face ridicule, perhaps even severe punishment for interfering in a police operation. But the thought of Lily, alone and terrified in the looming darkness, was a more powerful motivator than any fear of consequences. He would take Max to the park, to the very spot where Lily had vanished, and he would search for her himself, guided only by the old dog's extraordinary nose and his own unwavering faith. Ethan and Max, two solitary souls, each carrying their own burdens of the past, now embarked on a desperate, unsanctioned search, their combined hope a fragile beacon in the rapidly dimming light, entering the dark heart of the unknown, together. The air in Willow Creek Park hung heavy with a suffocating blend of dread and the acrid scent of damp earth. Police cruisers, their sirens silenced but their lights still strobing in the encroaching twilight, created a disorienting, pulsating glow among the ancient trees. Uniformed officers fanned out across the manicured lawns and winding paths, their voices hushed but urgent as they called out Lily's name. Volunteers, their faces etched with anxiety, joined the search, their worried murmurs and rustling movements adding to the tense atmosphere. It was a scene of palpable anxiety, a desperate scramble against the rapidly dwindling light of day and the encroaching cold of night. Every rustle of leaves, every distant siren, seemed to heighten the collective dread. The very atmosphere hummed with unspoken fears. The park, usually a place of joyous abandon, now felt like a vast, ominous stage for a tragedy. Ethan, gripping Max's newly cleaned collar, felt the oppressive weight of every anxious glance and dismissive wave from the adults. He ignored the whispers, the incredulous stares from parents pulling their own children closer. He had a singular, desperate mission. He led Max, not towards the well-trodden paths where the official search concentrated, nor towards the brightly lit areas where news crews had begun to set up their glaring lights, but deeper into the less frequented, overgrown sections of the park. They moved towards the dense thickets of blackberry bushes and the shadowed copses of ancient oaks, guided by a potent mixture of desperate hope and the unwavering pull of Max's instincts. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the overwhelming odds. He felt the cold fear of being caught, of being dismissed, but it was eclipsed by the burning need to find Lily. Max, sensing Ethan's quiet determination and the boy's unspoken faith, seemed to shed some of his deep-seated fear. The pervasive scent of Lily, faint but undeniably present, overlaid with the pungent odor of the damp forest floor and the metallic tang of human fear, galvanized him. His nose, a finely tuned instrument of detection honed by years of elite training, twitched, then flared. His old body, despite its aches and the stiffness in his joints, moved with a newfound purpose, a low-slung, ground-covering trot. He began to quarter the ground, his head low, sniffing meticulously, his tail, once an uncertain question mark, now held slightly higher, a signal of focus. He whimpered, a low, focused sound that was almost a growl of deep concentration, then let out a series of sharp, urgent barks, his attention fixed on a dense thicket of blackberry bushes, a spot that the police search, focused on more logical areas, had meticulously and tragically bypassed. The barks were not the scattered, aimless yaps of a stray, but the clear, concise communication of a trained professional. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat, a surge of adrenaline momentarily clearing the fog of his anxiety. "Max, what is it, boy?" he whispered. Then, unable to contain his excitement and desperate to be heard, he yelled, his voice raw with hope. "He found something! Max found something! Over here!" This sudden outburst, this unexpected intrusion into the meticulously organized if fruitless search, immediately drew attention. Max, the old scruffy stray, barking frantically into what seemed like empty, impenetrable bushes, and Ethan, the quiet, nerdy teenager, shouting with an uncharacteristic fervor, created an instant disruption in the somber quiet. The sudden, desperate urgency of Max's barks cut through the drone of police radios and the murmurs of concern. This unexpected display of Max's unique ability, revealed out of sheer, desperate necessity, was the involuntary unveiling of his hidden talent, a moment of raw, unplanned exposure, catching the attention of powerful forces on both sides of the law. It was a truth bursting forth, unbidden, into a world accustomed to carefully controlled narratives. Among those whose attention was sharply, disconcertingly drawn were two key figures, each observing the scene with vastly different intentions. Lieutenant Davies, a seasoned police officer whose face bore the weary, etched lines of countless late nights and the burden of unsolved cases, strode towards them. His uniform was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and the endless pressure of the missing child's case. He had been leading the ground search for hours, the weight of Lily's disappearance a palpable burden on his slumped shoulders. His initial reaction to Ethan and Max was one of irritation, a weary sigh escaping his lips. Just a kid and his stray dog, he thought, his patience wearing thin, looking for attention in a serious, tragic situation. Another distraction we don't need. He saw Max as nothing more than a nuisance, an untrained animal creating false alarms, and Ethan as a well-meaning but misguided teenager, disrupting an official high-stakes investigation. He raised a hand, ready to shoo them away, his gaze conveying a silent, exhausted plea for them to leave. But lurking in the shadows, a more sinister presence observed the scene with a chilling, predatory intensity. Detective Thorne, a younger, ambitious officer with a reputation for quickly closing cases and always being in the right place at the right time, watched from behind a police cruiser. Thorne cultivated an image of efficiency, unwavering dedication, and a ruthless pursuit of justice. But beneath the polished veneer of professionalism, he harbored a dark, dangerous secret. He was secretly in league with a sophisticated criminal organization, a clandestine network involved in abductions, human trafficking, and the illicit trade of sensitive personal data, including the identities and vulnerabilities of missing persons. Thorne had received explicit, chilling orders from his shadowy handlers. Ensure Lily was not found, or at least not found by the police. He had been meticulously working to divert the search, subtly planting false leads and expertly misdirecting search teams away from the true location, guiding them towards dead ends and wasting precious time. Thorne also carried a much deeper, more personal secret, one that sent a jolt of icy fear through him at the sight of the old German shepherd. He was the one who had betrayed the legendary K-9 officer Jasper during that botched mission years ago, leaving Jasper for dead in the ruins of a collapsed building to cover his own involvement in a major trafficking scheme. The sight of this old, scruffy German shepherd barking with such familiar, unwavering intensity, and the faint, unmistakable glint of the cleaned K-9 collar around its neck, sent a jolt of raw, visceral terror through Thorne. It can't be, he thought, his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Jasper. Alive? After all these years? The very possibility of Max being Jasper, the dog he had personally believed dead, the dog who could expose his years of deception and his deep-seated corruption, terrified him to his core. His carefully constructed world of lies threatened to implode. "Officer, get that dog out of here!" Thorne barked, his voice sharp with thinly veiled panic, struggling to mask his genuine fear with manufactured anger. He strode forward, his face contorted with feigned indignation, trying to seize control of the situation. "And the kid. They're interfering with a live investigation. This is a serious case, Lieutenant Davies, not a dog show. That stray is probably just agitated, and the boy is clearly just desperate for attention. He's confusing everyone." He shot a venomous glare at Ethan, a silent threat in his eyes. "This is obstructing justice, kid. You could be arrested." Thorne turned to Davies, lowering his voice conspiratorially, but his words still carried a dismissive, insidious bite. "Lieutenant, we don't have time for distractions. That dog is untrained and unpredictable. It could contaminate the scene, or worse, endanger other searchers, or even the child if she's out there. Have them removed, and take the dog to animal control immediately for aggressive behavior and interference with police work. We can't have wild animals running around a crime scene, especially not now." He subtly emphasized the word wild, attempting to entirely discredit Max and his crucial actions. Thorne's hidden objective was chillingly clear: to silence Max permanently and keep Lily's disappearance a mystery, ensuring his dark secrets and his criminal enterprise remained buried forever. The old K9, Jasper, was a ghost he thought he had successfully banished, and he would ensure it remained that way, even if it meant sacrificing a child's life. Davies, caught between the urgency of the missing child and Thorne's assertive, if somewhat illogical and aggressive commands, hesitated. He looked from Thorne's indignant, commanding face to Ethan's pleading, desperate eyes and Max's insistent, purposeful barks. A flicker of doubt, a tiny spark of unease crossed his weary features. Max's behavior was unusual for a mere stray. There was a disciplined intensity in his barks, a methodical nature to his sniffing. But Thorne's authority and the chaos of the scene held sway. The clock was ticking, and Davies felt the crushing pressure to act decisively, even if it meant making a tough call. "All right, kid," Davies said, his voice weary but firm, a tone that brooked no argument. "You need to clear out, and take your dog with you. We're on a tight schedule here, and we can't have distractions." "But he found something! He knows!" Ethan pleaded again, his voice cracking with desperation, gesturing frantically towards the thicket. "He's a K9! He was a police dog!" "He's an old dog, son," Thorne interjected smoothly, his voice dripping with false sympathy, a predatory glint in his eyes. "And you're a distressed kid. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're only making things harder. We need professionals, not hopeful amateurs." He gestured to two junior officers already approaching. "Escort them out, and make sure that dog is impounded. We can't have any loose ends." Thorne's carefully constructed plan was in motion, and he wouldn't let a boy and an old dog derail it. The truth, so close to being unveiled by Max's unyielding instincts, seemed destined to remain hidden, obscured by doubt and the deliberate machinations of a corrupt, powerful mind. Ethan felt the cold grip of despair, watching helplessly as his only hope was being taken from him. The cold, sterile fluorescent lights of the Willow Creek Animal Control Center hummed with an almost audible dread, casting long, stark shadows across the linoleum floor. The air, thick with the scent of disinfectant and the anxious whines and barks of other caged animals, created a cacophony that grated on Max's already frayed nerves. He was confined to a small metal cage, its bars a stark, brutal boundary between him and the outside world. Stripped of his newly cleaned collar, a physical link to his forgotten identity, he was reduced to a nameless, problematic stray, a paw in the way of a powerful criminal's nefarious plans. Lieutenant Davies, under the mounting pressure from Detective Thorne and, unknowingly, Thorne's shadowy superiors within the criminal underworld, had signed the order for Max's sedation due to aggressive behavior and interference with police work. The intention, as Thorne had subtly implied with a chilling smile, was to transfer him to a remote, overcrowded shelter once the immediate crisis of Lily's disappearance subsided, effectively making him disappear forever. Max, once the legendary Jasper, the canine officer whose every instinct was honed for precision and purpose, was now reduced to a helpless, forgotten creature. His instincts, screaming with the unfulfilled urgency of Lily's plight and the pervasive scent of her lingering fear, were now muffled by a growing sense of despair and the familiar, chilling re-emergence of past trauma. Fragmented memories, like shards of broken glass, pierced through his clouded mind. The betrayal, the sharp crack of a gunshot, the agonizing pain, the crushing weight of rubble, the final horrifying realization of abandonment. It all resurfaced, a suffocating blanket of fear and confusion. He whimpered, a low, defeated sound, as the attendants approached his cage, their faces grim, a needle glinting ominously in their hands. Max closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable oblivion. He was powerless, his will sapped by the weight of his forgotten past and the terrifying present. Meanwhile, Ethan was isolated in a sparse, windowless interrogation room at the police station, just a block away. The room smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a scent that now seemed to symbolize the suffocating bureaucracy that was trapping him. The drab, beige walls seemed to press in on him, amplifying his overwhelming sense of crushing solitude. He sat alone at a chipped laminate table, a single flickering fluorescent light humming above him, casting harsh shadows on his already strained face. No one believed him. Jessica's parents, consumed by their own agonizing grief, were too distraught to hear his frantic pleas, their eyes clouded with their own overwhelming sorrow. Lieutenant Davies, though his brow was furrowed with lingering doubt and a nascent unease about Thorne's increasingly aggressive tactics, was ultimately swayed by Thorne's assertive demeanor and the rigid formal procedures of the police force. Thorne himself, maintaining a facade of professional concern, had conducted the interrogation, his questions designed not to elicit information, but to confuse, intimidate, and ultimately silence Ethan. He painted Ethan as a deluded teenager, desperate for attention, making up fantastical, dangerous stories about an old stray dog. "Ethan, we understand you want to help, son," Thorne had said, his voice deceptively calm, almost paternal, yet laced with an icy edge that made Ethan shiver. He leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled, watching Ethan with unblinking, predatory eyes. "But interfering with a police investigation has serious consequences. Your dog is agitated, a danger to himself and potentially to our officers. And your claims, they're simply not credible. We operate on facts, Ethan, not on the wild imaginings of a distressed boy. Now, for the record, where exactly were you when Lily disappeared?" The questions were a maze, designed to trip him up, to make him contradict himself, to wear him down until he conceded defeat. Ethan's mind raced, a frantic scramble for words, for proof, for anything that could cut through Thorne's calm, insidious lies. He tried to explain Max's strange, purposeful behavior, the almost human intensity of his barks, the faded K9 unit etched into the cleaned collar. He even described the map Max had drawn on the ground in the park, the star marking the warehouse, the K9 badge. But his words were met with disinterest, a dismissive shake of Thorne's head, a patronizing smile. "Look, kid," Thorne finally said, leaning forward, his voice losing its false warmth, a triumphant glint in his eyes. "We're almost out of time. Lily's parents are in agony. We need real leads, not fantasies dreamed up by an old dog. You're better off staying out of this. Go home, grieve with your mother. Let the professionals handle this." Ethan felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. The overwhelming weight of his father's tragic death, the relentless daily bullying at school that had chipped away at his self-worth, and now this impossible, agonizing situation crashed down on him. He remembered the feeling of helplessness when his father had died in the line of duty, the agonizing inability to do anything at all, to save him. Now he faced a chillingly similar powerlessness. Max was caged, sedated, drifting towards an unknown fate. Lily was still missing, probably terrified, and he was trapped, powerless to act. Trapped within these four walls, his pleas dismissed as childish fantasies. He felt truly useless, a timid, insignificant boy in a vast, indifferent world that seemed determined to break him. The despair was a heavy, suffocating blanket, threatening to extinguish the last flicker of hope. Then, a chilling whisper from the hallway, faint but distinct, pierced the thick walls of the interrogation room. Thorne, believing Ethan was thoroughly broken and posed no further threat, had stepped out into the corridor, on the phone, his voice low, urgent. Ethan, driven by a desperate primal instinct, pressed his ear against the cold metal door, straining to listen. "Yes, everything is in place," Thorne mumbled, his voice tight with anticipation. "The transfer is set for midnight. She'll be out of the city by then. No trace." The words transfer, midnight, and no trace hit Ethan like a physical blow, each syllable a brutal hammer stroke against his already fragile peace. Midnight. Only a few hours left. Lily would be gone forever, vanished into the shadows, a ghost like his father. The clock on the wall of the main hall, dimly visible through the narrow glass panel in the door, loomed, its hands steadily approaching the chilling deadline. A surge of adrenaline, cold and stark, coursed through Ethan's veins, cutting through the fog of his despair. This was the ultimate test, a gauntlet thrown down before him, a race against the clock, against a ruthless adversary, and against his own paralyzing fear. He couldn't afford to be useless, to be silent, not anymore. He had to act. He had to free Max. He had to find Lily. His father, a man who had faced danger head-on, who had never given up, would have never stood by and done nothing, and neither would he. The ticking clock was no longer just a distant threat. It was a blaring alarm, driving him forward, compelling him to fight with every fiber of his being. He scanned the room frantically, his eyes landing on a small, old-fashioned utility panel near the back wall, almost hidden behind a dusty filing cabinet. A spark of his father's ingenuity, a faint echo of the man who had taught him how to see the unseen, ignited within him. His last hope lay in his hands, in his wits, and in the legendary K-9 officer waiting, unknowingly, for his release. 0005, 0004, 0003. The glowing red numbers on the digital clock in the police station's main hall seemed to pulse with a terrifying urgency, casting an ominous glow on the faces of the officers bustling past. Every second was a hammer blow against Ethan's dwindling hope, a countdown to Lily's permanent disappearance. Thorne, having finished his chilling interrogation, and believing Ethan was thoroughly broken and posed no further threat, had left the boy alone in the interrogation room, smugly confident that Max was safely neutralized and Lily's transfer was imminent. He was already making final, secret arrangements for Lily's transfer, a triumphant, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, oblivious to the storm he was about to unleash. Ethan, however, was far from defeated. His mind, usually scattered by anxiety and the noise of his internal struggles, was now hyper-focused, sharper than it had ever been. His father, a man of quiet ingenuity and a deep understanding of mechanical systems, had taught him about basic electronics, the subtle vulnerabilities of wiring, and how a seemingly complex system could be disrupted by a simple, well-placed action. He remembered his dad showing him how a simple overload could trip a circuit breaker, how a small, well-timed distraction could open a large, otherwise impenetrable door. With a sudden surge of adrenaline and inspiration, Ethan's eyes landed on a small, old-fashioned utility panel near the back wall of the interrogation room, almost hidden behind a dusty filing cabinet. It was an overlooked access point for the building's older electrical wiring, a relic from a previous renovation, a detail most would ignore. A desperate, audacious idea began to form in his mind, a frantic, high-stakes gamble. With trembling but determined fingers, Ethan managed to pry open the rusted latch of the utility panel. Inside, a tangled, bewildering mess of wires greeted him, a spaghetti junction of multicolored conduits. He remembered his father's words, echoing in his mind like a beacon. "Find the main artery, kid. A quick pinch can stop the whole heart from beating." He scanned the wires, his eyes darting across the schematic etched faintly on the inside of the panel door. He located the thickest power conduit, the one marked with a red warning label, his mind recalling the specific junction his father had pointed out on an old, crumpled wiring diagram sketches he used to make on the back of old fire reports. With a whispered prayer, a surge of desperate courage, and a deep breath, he pulled two specific wires together, creating a small, controlled spark that briefly illuminated the dusty panel. Pop! The lights in the entire police station flickered violently, plunging the main hall into momentary, disorienting darkness, followed almost immediately by the shrill, deafening blare of the fire alarm. "Fire! Fire alarm! Everyone evacuate!" A dispatcher's voice blared over the intercom, quickly followed by the distinct, urgent sound of emergency vehicle sirens rapidly approaching the station. In the ensuing chaos, with officers rushing to address the false alarm, fumbling in the sudden dimness, and the cacophony of the alarm overwhelming all other sounds, Ethan, a silent shadow, slipped out of the interrogation room. He moved with a speed he didn't know he possessed, a phantom among the confused, shouting officers, dodging their frantic movements, his small frame almost invisible in the pandemonium. His destination was clear: the Willow Creek Animal Control Center, a mere block away, its exterior now dimly lit by the flashing lights of distant emergency vehicles. He burst through the back door, startling the lone attendant, who was fumbling with a flashlight, attempting to restore power. "My dog!" Ethan gasped, his voice raw with urgency, pointing frantically to Max's cage. "He's needed! It's an emergency! He can find Lily!" The attendant, flustered by the station-wide chaos and the blaring alarm, his eyes wide with confusion, fumbled with the keys. Just as he managed to unlock the cage, Max, sensing Ethan's presence, the raw urgency in the boy's voice, and the pervasive scent of Lily mixed with the fresh tang of fear, lunged forward. He was free, his old body propelled by a renewed purpose. Max didn't hesitate. The scent of Lily, stronger now, almost tangible, mixed with a faint metallic tang he couldn't quite place, a smell of damp concrete and something acrid, almost chemically familiar, pulled him towards the city's industrial outskirts. He was no longer the timid stray. He was Jasper, the canine legend, his instincts now fully restored, his past traumas momentarily forgotten in the face of the desperate present. He bolted, a streak of gray fur against the darkening, rain-slicked streets, weaving through narrow alleys and deserted loading docks, leading Ethan towards a labyrinth of abandoned warehouses, an area the police had completely dismissed from their search grid. Ethan, recalling the crude map Max had drawn on the ground in the park earlier, a map of the warehouse district, with a small star marking a specific building, and the distinct image of a canine badge clipped to a collar, followed on pure adrenaline, his heart pounding in his ears like a drum. The drawing, a silent, prophetic guide, had always been there, waiting to be fully understood, a forgotten piece of a puzzle now locking into place. They arrived at the designated warehouse, a hulking, dilapidated structure that seemed to sag under its own weight. A flickering, weak light emanated from within, casting eerie shadows through grimy windows. Max skidded to a halt outside, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest, a sound of primal warning. He nudged the loosely boarded-up side entrance with his nose, then looked back at Ethan, his eyes burning with an undeniable urgency. Inside, Detective Thorne, his face etched with cruel triumph, stood over a bound and gagged Lily. She struggled weakly against her restraints, her small body trembling, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wide with terror. Thorne, his sleeves rolled up, revealing a small, intricate tattoo of a broken eagle's wing, a subtle, chilling nod to his criminal syndicate, and a twisted mockery of the K9 unit's emblem, was preparing a syringe filled with a clear, viscous liquid. "Just a little nap, sweetie," he sneered, his voice chillingly calm, devoid of any humanity. "Then you'll be on your way. You won't remember a thing." Crash! Ethan, using a discarded length of heavy pipe he'd found outside, smashed a small, high window, sending shards of glass scattering across the concrete floor. The sudden deafening sound shattered the oppressive silence within the warehouse, creating a crucial diversion. Thorne spun around, startled, his eyes wide with surprise and fury. Max, seizing the fleeting opportunity, burst through the loosely boarded-up side entrance, a silent, furry missile propelled by instinct and a revived purpose. He was no longer the old broken dog. He was Jasper, a force of nature, a legend reborn. He lunged at Thorne, a primal snarl ripping from his throat, his teeth bared. "Max!" Ethan screamed, scrambling through the shattered window, his legs burning, his heart lodged in his throat. "Jasper, you're alive!" Thorne roared, his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and utter terror. He quickly recovered, his hand darting to his waistband, pulling out a small black pistol. He aimed it directly at Max, his finger tightening on the trigger. The gun glinted ominously in the dim, flickering light, a cold, metallic promise of death. The scene froze, every sound, every breath suspended in the air. This was the bated breath moment. The air crackled with a terrifying stillness. Max, frozen mid-lunge, his eyes locked on the ominous barrel of the gun. Ethan, scrambling over debris, felt a cold, crushing despair wash over him. Would Max, after all this, after all they had been through, finally fall? Would Thorne, in his depravity, snuff out this heroic spark, this last glimmer of truth? The bullet seemed destined to find its mark, sealing Thorne's victory and burying the truth forever. Another victim in his monstrous game. Just as Thorne's finger tightened on the trigger, a millimeter from firing, Max, with an uncanny, almost supernatural focus, shifted his gaze. His eyes, now startlingly clear, vibrant and intelligent, locked not on Thorne's face, but on the small silver K9 badge pinned to Thorne's chest, the very badge that represented the law Thorne had betrayed, the unit Jasper had once served. A subtle, almost imperceptible wave of energy seemed to emanate from Max, a silent pulse, a flash of pure, concentrated memory that seemed to penetrate Thorne's very being, bypassing his defenses, striking directly at the core of his guilt. Thorne suddenly stiffened, his eyes glazing over, his hand frozen on the gun. A fleeting memory, sharp and vivid, flashed through his mind, not his own, but Jasper's. A rainy night, the deafening sound of a gunshot, the agonizing pain, and the horrifying image of Jasper, the K9 officer, falling, his loyal eyes dimming, staring at him as he walked away, leaving him for dead. The memory was brief, but it triggered something profound, something uncontrollable. Thorne's gaze snapped down to Max's old cleaned collar, the engravings, Jasper K9 Unit, now gleaming unmistakably under the dim light. His face went ashen, sweat beading on his forehead, his jaw slack. "No! No, it can't be!" Thorne stammered, his voice a pathetic whimper, his carefully constructed composure shattered, replaced by raw, visceral terror. How are you alive? I shot you. I thought you were dead. I betrayed you to cover the smuggling. Lily, she saw me take the documents from the vault, the client list. I had no choice." He blurted out details, a torrent of horrifying confessions, compelled by an unseen force that seemed to rip the words from his throat. The exact route of the smuggled goods, the names of his co-conspirators, his desperate plan to abduct Lily after she accidentally witnessed him meeting with his criminal contacts in the park, his meticulous efforts to frame a previous colleague for a smaller offense to deflect suspicion from himself, a vast, intricate web of deceit and corruption crumbling around him, exposed by the very creature he thought he had silenced forever. The cacophony of sirens, now deafeningly close, pierced the warehouse walls. Lieutenant Davies, whose lingering doubts about Thorne had gnawed at him, and who had been tracking Ethan using a discreet GPS device Ethan had unknowingly left in his backpack, a habit from his father's search and rescue training, always leaving a breadcrumb trail, had arrived with a full tactical unit. He had witnessed the entire horrifying scene through the shattered window, his portable police camera recording every single damning word of Thorne's desperate, involuntary confession. Davies' face, grim and determined, now reflected a dawning comprehension of the massive, insidious corruption that had been festering within his own department, right under his nose. He had dismissed a child's plea and almost lost his chance at justice. The crowd's reaction was a swift, overwhelming torrent. Neighbors, alerted by the commotion, the flashing lights, and the unusual police presence in the abandoned industrial district, had gathered outside the warehouse, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. From initial confusion, their expression shifted to disbelief as Thorne's panicked, desperate confession echoed through the open warehouse door. amplified by the sudden, stunned silence from within. A collective gasp, then a rising tide of angry murmurs swelled into an indignant roar. "He's a fraud!" someone screamed, the words igniting a new level of fury. "He framed them! He tried to hurt the child!" People surged forward, not in a chaotic, mindless mob, but with a unified sense of betrayal and righteous anger, their voices rising in a clamor for answers, for justice. They stared, awestruck, at Max, the legendary Jasper, and at Ethan, the quiet boy who had dared to believe. They didn't just see a struggling teenager and an old dog. They saw a miracle unfolding before their very eyes. They applauded. Some wept openly, directing their awe and admiration towards Ethan and Max. They did not just see an old dog being vindicated. They saw a powerful validation of their own intuition, a quiet hero who had defied all odds. Thorn, utterly unmasked, was no longer the powerful, charismatic detective. He was a cornered animal, trembling, trapped. He tried to push through the enraged onlookers, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic fear. But hands reached out, grabbing, holding him back, their grip surprisingly firm. The police officers who had arrived with Davies, their faces now reflecting a dawning comprehension of the true situation and the undeniable evidence unfolding before their eyes, no longer looked at Ethan with suspicion or dismissal. Instead, they moved swiftly and decisively to secure Thorn, recognizing the volatile shift in public sentiment and the undeniable, horrifying truth of the moment. Thorn, the architect of so much misery, was finally irrevocably caught. Ethan stood amidst the pandemonium, utterly drained but strangely exhilarated, a quiet sense of triumph blooming in his chest. He looked at Max, whose small nose, still twitching, now nudged Lily gently, reassuringly. Lily, now untied and safe, clung to him, her sobs subsiding into quiet trembles. Max's drawing, the crude map that had led them here, a testament to his extraordinary gift, now glowed with the undeniable light of truth, validating every impossible detail. Then, Ethan looked at the bewildered, angry faces of the citizens of Willow Creek, their initial judgment replaced by awe, gratitude, and burgeoning respect. They weren't just seeing a timid teenager and an old stray. They were witnessing a truth-teller, a symbol of defiance against overwhelming power, and a legendary canine hero who had returned from the shadows to reclaim his legacy. Ethan, the quiet kid, had not only saved Lily, but had, with Max by his side, ripped open the festering wound of corruption at the heart of the city, exposing a monstrous secret that had haunted them for years. The master storyteller had orchestrated a climax that was not only a triumph of truth, but a profound personal vindication, revealing the chilling depths of the villain's depravity and the hidden, unyielding strength of an unassuming hero and his loyal, legendary companion. The grand warehouse, moments ago a maelstrom of shock and righteous fury, slowly settled into a stunned, disbelieving silence. The immediate aftermath of Detective Thorne's panicked, involuntary confession was a whirlwind of motion. Police officers, who had arrived with Lieutenant Davies, swiftly moved to apprehend Detective Thorne. His desperate struggles were futile. The colossal weight of his public exposure and the undeniable evidence of his crimes seemed to crush him, reducing him to a pathetic, broken figure. His once polished uniform was disheveled, his eyes wide with a raw terror that eclipsed his earlier smugness. "Detective Thorne," Lieutenant Davies stated, his voice resonating with cold, unwavering authority, "you are under arrest for multiple counts of kidnapping, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting a criminal organization, and the attempted unlawful transfer of a minor. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The sharp click of the handcuffs was final, echoing in the vast space. Thorne, stripped bare of his arrogance and charm, was led away, his head bowed, his expensive suit momentarily forgotten in his exposed rage. His downfall was absolute, a chilling testament to the unforgiving nature of truth, brought to light by an old dog and a determined boy. The subsequent investigation, fueled by Thorne's live confession, the meticulous details Max had drawn in the park, and the rapid uncovering of financial trails Thorne had tried to bury, swiftly unearthed a vast, intricate network of corruption that reached deep into the city's underbelly. It confirmed the full extent of his depravity and the criminal syndicate he served. His trial was swift and merciless, ending with a lengthy, well-deserved prison sentence, a fate entirely commensurate with the depth of his crimes and the lives he had attempted to ruin. Amidst the lingering shock and the sounds of official procedures, Lieutenant Davies stepped forward. His usual stoic demeanor was gone, replaced by a profound sense of introspection, deep regret, and a dawning humility. He walked directly to Ethan, who still stood beside Max, clutching the old dog's fur, the air around them humming with the residue of their extraordinary triumph. Lily, now safe in the arms of a relieved Jessica, watched wide-eyed. Lieutenant Davies' voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly soft, yet firm with conviction, his eyes meeting Ethan's with a gaze of genuine remorse. "Ethan," he began, his voice rough with emotion, I owe you, and Max, a profound apology. I prided myself on my experience, on upholding the letter of the law, but I allowed myself to be swayed by appearances, by rank, and by a rigid adherence to what I thought was evidence. I dismissed your plea. I doubted Max. I almost missed the truth, so loudly spoken by a child and a brave animal." He paused, his gaze shifting to Max, then back to Ethan. "I failed you both, and I failed the very principles of justice I swore to uphold. Thorne's confession, recorded by my own camera, is undeniable. Max, Jasper, he truly is a legend." His apology was heartfelt, raw with shame and true remorse, a poignant recognition of his past misjudgment and the moral blind spot that had allowed corruption to flourish right under his nose. Ethan looked at him, his expression softening. He saw not the dismissive officer, but a man genuinely grappling with a profound realization, a man humbled by truth. "It takes courage to admit a mistake, Lieutenant," Ethan said, his voice quiet but steady, a newfound maturity in his tone. "The truth is often difficult to see, especially when it's cloaked in power and illusion." Lieutenant Davies nodded, his eyes glistening slightly. "Then let me try to make amends. Ethan, what you and Max, what Jasper have revealed today is immeasurable. You've not only exposed a deep-seated corruption, but also reminded us all that truth can manifest in the most unexpected ways, from the most unexpected sources. The charges against you for obstruction have been summarily dismissed. Your record will be expunged. And in recognition of Max's extraordinary service and the profound injustice he endured, the police department wants to offer Jasper his official place back in the K-9 unit, not as an active officer, but as a revered honorary K-9, a symbol of courage and a living legend. He will receive full benefits, including lifetime care. And for you, Ethan," Davies continued, a faint smile touching his lips, "the city wishes to establish a scholarship fund in your name, covering your education through university. But more than that, your ingenuity, your calm under pressure, and your understanding of systems, these are rare gifts. We would like to offer you a unique opportunity to work with our newly formed Special Investigations Unit, focusing on data analysis and technical support for search and rescue operations. You would be a consultant, training with our lead analysts, developing protocols for using technology to aid in missing persons cases, a role that very few possess the natural aptitude for. This is an offer of a future, Ethan, one where your unique talents can truly flourish and make a tangible difference. This was not just a job offer. It was an offer of purpose, of intellectual freedom, a platform to shape the future of rescue operations, and a significant recognition of his unique ability to discern truth and patterns where others saw only chaos." Ethan considered the offer. His life had been one of quiet struggle, his battles fought within the pages of books or against the bullies at school. But the past few weeks had shown him the profound impact one individual, coupled with an extraordinary dog, could have when armed with truth and courage, when embracing their unique flaws as strengths. He looked at Max, whose calm eyes met his, then at the now reverent faces of the police officers, their eyes filled with a new respect. He saw the genuine admiration, the true recognition of his abilities, and the chance to transform his grief into a powerful force for good. "I accept, Lieutenant," Ethan finally said, a faint, genuine smile gracing his lips. "Not just for myself, or for Max, but for all the missing, for all those whose truth is buried. My only request is that we establish a robust oversight committee for all police procedures involving missing persons, particularly those where initial leads are dismissed, to ensure that no family ever faces such a desperate, lonely battle again. And that all officers undergo mandatory retraining in recognizing non-traditional forms of communication and evidence, and perhaps, he added, a hint of his old shyness, but also a new confidence in his voice, that they learn to listen more closely to the whispers of intuition. Lieutenant Davies, visibly relieved and deeply moved, immediately agreed, his resolve to reform the system unwavering. The news of Detective Thorne's dramatic downfall and Ethan and Max's extraordinary revelation spread like wildfire, not just through Willow Creek, but across the nation and even internationally. Ethan, the quiet, nerdy teenager, became the whisperer of truth, a quiet legend. Max, the abandoned stray, was revealed as Jasper, the legendary K9 hero, his story a testament to unwavering loyalty and instinct. Journalists from major networks flocked to Willow Creek, eager to hear their incredible story. Ethan, with Jessica by his side, his former tormentor, now his staunchest ally, her family forever indebted to him, her eyes now filled with deep gratitude and respect, granted a series of carefully chosen interviews. He spoke not of vengeance, but of the importance of vigilance, transparency, and the profound power of listening to the unseen, of believing in the impossible. He spoke of the forgotten wisdom of trusting one's gut, of the hidden narratives embedded in overlooked details, and how such intuition, when combined with courage and a thirst for justice, could dismantle even the most formidable lies. Later that week, as the dust began to settle, Ethan and Max sat together on their favorite hill in Willow Creek Park, the place where they first truly connected. The vibrant colors of autumn painted the trees around them, a tapestry of golds, reds, and oranges. The air was crisp, clean, carrying the distant, muted sounds of the city returning to a new normal. "You know," Ethan mused softly, running his fingers through Max's now soft, clean fur, "I still can't quite wrap my head around it. The way you're drawing, it just came to life. And Thorne's confession, it was like he was compelled to speak the truth. What was it, Max? What did you do?" His voice was filled with wonder, his gaze fixed on the old dog. He carefully took Max's restored collar, gleaming now, and placed it around his neck, the K9 unit badge shining proudly. Max, with renewed energy, gently nudged Ethan's hand, then let out a soft whine, his gaze distant, as if recalling something profound. Ethan understood. "The K9 unit badge," Ethan whispered, remembering the symbol in Max's drawing that day. "It wasn't just a map, was it? It was a memory. Yours." He looked down at the badge, gleaming softly. "And when you focused on Thorne's badge, you were somehow transferring that memory, that truth, into him. You weren't just detecting. You were revealing." Max whimpered again, a low, contented sound, then rested his head on Ethan's lap, his eyes fixed on the distant city skyline. Ethan stroked his fur, a profound sense of peace settling over him. "We found each other, Jasper," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "And we found our purpose, together." Max responded with a soft thump of his tail against the grass, a quiet affirmation. Both had been saved, not just from physical peril, but from the crushing weight of loneliness and the silent torment of forgotten identities. The city had indeed found a new calm, a profound sense of peace built not on false promises, but on transparency, integrity, and the quiet, unwavering power of truth, meticulously woven into the very fabric of its rebirth. 5 years later, the city of Willow Creek, once clouded by an unspoken tension and the pervasive hum of corporate power, now vibrated with a palpably different kind of energy. The air, once thick with unspoken resentments and the subtle pressure of relentless competition, felt lighter, imbued with a profound sense of community and renewed purpose. This was Viridian's second spring, a period not just of economic resurgence, but of a deep societal and ethical renewal. The gleaming skyscrapers still touched the sky, their glass facades reflecting the boundless blue, but beneath them, a subtle yet significant shift had taken hold. a quiet, widespread appreciation for authenticity, for the unique, and for the profound beauty that could be found in the unexpected, in the overlooked corners and the silent heroes. At the very heart of this transformation, yet humbly unassuming as ever, stood Ethan Miller. The tremor that once shook his hands, a physical manifestation of past anxiety and trauma, had long since faded, leaving his movements steady and sure. Now 21, Ethan was a recognized pioneer in the burgeoning field of computational search and rescue. His vast, light-filled office, a converted loft space in a revitalized downtown district that overlooked the very park where he had found Max, hummed with the quiet whir of servers and the soft clicks of keyboards. He wasn't just a data analyst. He was a problem solver, a pattern finder, his keen intellect allowing him to spot connections and anomalies in vast datasets of missing persons cases that baffled seasoned detectives. His algorithms, a unique blend of predictive modeling and spatial analysis, had become invaluable tools, transforming cold cases into active leads and drastically reducing search times. He had become a quiet icon in his field, his work a poignant reminder that even the most obscure knowledge, when applied with purpose, could be reborn into something magnificent and life-saving. Ethan had fully embraced his role as a guiding force behind the city's burgeoning social justice initiatives. Beyond his groundbreaking work with the Special Investigations Unit, he personally oversaw several community tech workshops, ensuring that the voices of underrepresented youths, particularly those from marginalized communities, found their rightful place in the digital world. He taught coding, data analysis, and digital forensics, empowering a new generation with the tools to advocate for themselves and their communities. His keen eye for genuine talent, unclouded by the prejudices of the past, unearthed hidden gems that consistently captivated both critics and the public. He didn't just advocate for technology, he championed people, creating a supportive ecosystem where innovation and healing could flourish regardless of background or past struggles. The principle of paying it forward had become the bedrock of Ethan's life. Beyond his professional achievements and community projects, he had co-founded Jasper's Legacy Foundation with Lieutenant Davies, now Captain Davies, a testament to his own reform and renewed dedication to justice. A non-profit organization that had grown into a formidable force for change. Housed in a beautifully renovated old warehouse near the revitalized city waterfront, the very warehouse where Lily had been found, the foundation offered comprehensive support to families grappling with legal injustices and to children with unique, often misunderstood abilities. It provided generous grants, covering everything from specialized legal aid to cutting-edge educational resources for children with neurodivergent traits or unique sensory processing abilities. Crucially, it offered tailored mentorship programs, connecting struggling families with legal professionals, educators, and even retired K-9 handlers who understood their unique challenges. Ethan himself often led workshops, his voice calm and encouraging, sharing his story not just of overcoming adversity, but of finding strength in vulnerability and the transformative power of embracing one's authentic self. His narrative, often shared with heartfelt sincerity, became a beacon of hope, inspiring countless individuals to pursue justice and embrace their own unique gifts despite formidable obstacles. The chilling memory of Detective Thorne's dramatic downfall and the subsequent uncovering of his widespread corruption served as a potent, unspoken lesson etched into the collective consciousness of Willow Creek. The city, once almost seduced by superficial charm and illicit gains, now valued authenticity, transparency, and ethical leadership above all else. The police department, influenced by Captain Davies's public apology and his subsequent tireless advocacy, had undergone significant internal reforms, particularly in how they handled missing persons cases and evaluated non-traditional evidence. Captain Evelyn Carter, the former judge who had initially presided over Lily's case, now retired from the bench, had dedicated her post-judicial life to overseeing the new independent oversight committees for police procedures, ensuring that justice was truly blind to wealth and power. She often publicly lauded Ethan and Jasper, famously stating at a Jasper's Legacy Foundation gala, "Ethan Miller taught us that true justice doesn't just uphold the law, it seeks the truth, no matter how deeply buried, and protects the most vulnerable among us." He and Jasper are living proof that even the smallest voice, or the oldest paw, can bring down the mightiest lies. Her words, echoing a newfound wisdom, underscored the city's unwavering commitment to integrity and its profound shift in values. The very physical heart of the city found its own symbolic reflection of Ethan and Jasper's journey. In the city's central public square, once a sterile expanse of cold stone and forgotten corners, now stood a vibrant, interactive art installation. It was Max Jasper's now completed Echoes of Loyalty, a monumental, ever-evolving sculpture of polished steel and integrated light. It pulsed with iridescent energy, catching the sun's rays and refracting them into a dazzling spectrum of colors that danced across the square. Each intricate curve of steel, each deliberate shadow was not a flaw but a deliberate design choice, a shimmering vein of light that added depth and character, revealing new patterns and subtle narratives with every shift of light and perspective. A discreet plaque at its base, installed by a grateful city council, simply read, "Echoes of Loyalty, a testament to unseen abilities, unyielding faith, and the light that breaks through," in honor of Jasper, K9 Unit, and Ethan Miller. It was a living, breathing monument to a quiet boy who had seen beyond the surface, and a legendary dog who had dared to return from the shadows. On a sun-drenched Saturday morning, a gentle melody of children's laughter and light chatter drifted across the square. Ethan Miller sat on a polished stone bench near Max Jasper's magnificent installation, his cherished K9 Unit badge, the very one from Max's collar, now framed and displayed proudly on his office desk. A sleek, black cat, the descendant of the timid alley stray that had once adopted him and Max, now plump and healthy, dozed contentedly on the bench beside him. Ethan was patiently guiding a young boy, whose hands trembled noticeably, through the initial steps of a simple coding exercise on a tablet, his voice calm and encouraging. The boy, a new mentee from the Jasper's Legacy Foundation, was meticulously arranging lines of code to make a small, animated dog run across the screen. Ethan looked out at the bustling square, at the children playing, their faces alight with wonder as they gazed at Echoes of Loyalty. He glanced down at the contented cat, then finally his gaze settled on Max, Jasper, now very old, his muzzle completely white, but his eyes still bright with intelligence and profound peace. The old K9 lay stretched out by Ethan's feet, soaking in the sunlight, occasionally twitching his tail in contentment. He wasn't just resting, he was observing, a silent, watchful guardian. Ethan smiled, a profound, serene expression of peace and fulfillment spreading across his face. He was no longer just a quiet teenager or a survivor. He was a mentor, a visionary, a living testament to the power of truth and love. Willow Creek had indeed found its second spring, a period of not just renewal, but a flourishing life built on authenticity, integrity, and the quiet, unwavering power of unseen heroes. His legacy, and the unique beauty he and Max Jasper brought forth from every shattered piece, would now flow as freely and abundantly as the light itself, illuminating and nourishing generations to come. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining us on this journey.